Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Mind Movement Health podcast. Before we jump in today's episode, just a shout out to our sponsor, Paleo Valley. If you've been looking to up your health game and you want a little bit of extra help, then look no further than Paleo Valley. I myself take their vitamin C, their protein powders, their electrolyte powders, and their turmeric. All their products are organic and great for boosting your health. To check out all of the Paleo Valley products, head on over to our podcast show notes. Now, this week's episode is going to be a little bit different because I want to take you back to 2015, a year that completely changed how I think about health. Definitely, as I reflect back now on it, it was really the catalyst. And at the time, I was teaching Pilates. I had my own Pilates studio. I'd had that for a number of years. I was exercising. I ate well. And from the outside, I probably looked incredibly healthy. But I really wasn't that well. And it took one of the hardest periods of my life to make me realize that doing healthy things and actually being healthy aren't always the same thing. And it all started one night when I got that dreaded phone call. The phone call that comes in the middle of the night that wakes you up from a deep sleep, and you know if somebody is calling you at the wee hours of the morning that it's definitely only going to be bad news. And for me, that's exactly what happened. I received a phone call from my dad in the middle of the night to tell me that my older brother had died. And it was a complete shock because he was only 40. And it was the catalyst for what was about to happen at the time. And at that time, I had two girls. My eldest was just turned 2, and I had a 6-week-old baby. So a lot going on just in that. And then receiving that news, as I said, complete shock out of nowhere, wasn't something that we were expecting. And my parents were obviously very grief-stricken, and they needed help with the funeral arrangements and the planning that comes with that. And so I have this very vivid memory of being at the funeral home for the meeting to organise my brother's funeral. Me, my husband, I had Charlotte, my 6-week-old, with me because she was still breastfeeding and I couldn't be away from her. And my parents were there. And Charlotte started crying and I had to breastfeed her in the middle of the funeral arrangements meeting. And I have this moment where I remember sitting there and thinking, this is the circle of life. I have a newborn in my arms. I have the start of life here in one moment. And in the next moment, I'm talking about what type of casket and all of these details as we finalize the end point of life for my brother. And at the time, as I said, life was very busy. And once we got through the funeral, shortly after my brother passed away, my mum was diagnosed with pneumonia. Grief does some terrible things, and it definitely contributed to the onset of her pneumonia. And that then progressed, and she was diagnosed with emphysema and COPD. Now, she had been a smoker for most of her life, so a diagnosis like this is not surprising, but again, it's always shocking when my mum had been working full-time, still doing all the usual things, no apparent issues with her health, and then she was in a hospital bed. And she ended up very unwell for quite a number of years, in and out of hospital. And to the point where we were called so often to come in and say goodbye. I'm sure if you've listening in and you've had this phone call from the hospital before, they call you and they let you know that your loved one is probably going to pass away sometime soon. They can never give you a time, obviously. It could be an hour, it could be a couple of hours, but they're calling you because they're telling you to come down and be there because this could be some final moments that you want to spend with them. And we had that phone call come through so many times that my brother and sister would ring me and say, is this really the end? Do I really need to get down there right now? Or is this another false alarm? Because we've had this happen so many times, and she just kept going. She would come out of it and struggle on. And she even referred to herself as being Lazarus. She said, you just can't get rid of me. I'm just going to keep coming back. And unfortunately, she did end up passing away in 2024. But as I said, it was a long road and a lot of time in and out of hospital. And during that time, over those number of years, I lost quite a bit of weight. In that sort of 2015 time, I was taking care of 2 young kids, trying to run a business, keep a household going, and constantly going to the hospital, or my mum was in a nursing home for a period of time, or wherever it was, back and forth. And my health took a big hit. I still believe to keep my health going at that time that I needed to exercise, I needed to eat healthy, I needed to do all those things that we know means or equals health. But I didn't take time or extra time to rest. And more importantly, I didn't pay attention to my nervous system. And I was stuck in a fight or flight mode without even realizing it. And the strange thing was, if you were looking at my life from the outside, if you were one of my Pilates clients, you probably thought I had it all together. I was still eating healthy. I was still exercising. Yes, life was busy and my mum was unwell, but I knew what I was supposed to do and I just kept going. But I was exhausted all of the time. I'd lost quite a bit of weight just because when you're stressed all the time, the last thing you'd feel like doing is eating. And also I wasn't prioritizing food because I would go from teaching class to breastfeeding my daughter to getting to the hospital to coming home to doing the next thing. And so food wasn't super high on my priority list. And as I said before, being stuck in that stressful state all the time, my nervous system was completely out of whack. And it took a while during that time, it took a good couple of years of that happening for me to start realizing that being healthy and then doing healthy things are two separate things. And I remember going to my GP because I was maxed out, I was exhausted. And I explained what was happening, and we did blood work, and it came back to show me that I was severely iron deficient. So that was definitely contributing to my lack of energy and tiredness. And we did discuss antidepressants. And I remember leaving, and I still didn't really understand what I needed. For me at the time, I knew that I didn't need the antidepressants at that point, but I knew I needed to obviously address the iron once we found that out. But I didn't know how to support myself any more than through all the things I thought I was already doing to be healthy. And if I could talk to that Kate from 10 plus years ago with the knowledge that I have now, it would be to explain to her that there were very clear signs of prolonged stress and that my body was dealing with stress but not dealing with it very well and staying in that constantly on state, that I wasn't ever really relaxing or coming back down to that rest and digest state. I was just constantly on till I fell asleep. And I can see that my body had obviously been dealing with stress for a long time. I didn't need another workout or a healthy meal plan. What I really needed was rest and recovery. And I needed support. And at the time, like most women probably realize, their mums are their support. I apologize because I'm getting emotional talking about this. I realized after the fact that I needed to build better stress resilience by looking after my nervous system health, something that I'm very aware of now, having done my breathwork facilitator training and learnt so much more about how important our nervous system is. And at the time, with that feeling of not having the support I needed from the things that I was doing for myself and also from others, I just wasn't functioning very well. I continued to do intense exercise, which was actually placing a lot more stress on my body. Combine that with my loss of appetite and not eating so much, I was actually underfueling my body, which puts even more stress on it. And this was leading to lower immunity and increased risk of injury, which was both happening. I was getting sick way more regularly, and I wasn't performing very well in my exercise either. And what I really needed to do was rest and create more space and small moments of rest in my life. Whether or not that was incorporating breath work, which I eventually learned after a couple of years of going through that, being okay just to take some time out, to sit down, to have a cup of tea, to read a book. I needed to realize that taking care of myself didn't mean I cared less about anyone else. I just needed to include myself in the list of people I was taking care of. And hindsight is a great thing, isn't it? I learned a lot about reflecting back on that time, going through that and coming out on the other side. It made me realize that being healthy isn't just about diet and exercise. Yes, obviously those things matter. It can be a great place to start. But if we don't prioritize our nervous system health, then we can be stuck in these fight or flight patterns, which will drain our focus, our energy, our resilience, and ultimately just leave us feeling depleted for the majority of the time. And going through this experience, I also realized I wasn't the only one going through this. And other people's experience didn't look exactly like mine, but the outcomes were very similar. And the things we were feeling and experiencing at the time, again, were very similar. And somewhere in between being a kid and becoming a mum, I had put everybody's needs before my own, which worked until it didn't work. And for me, I'd given up some things. You're time poor when you become a parent. When you're running a business and raising kids, it feels like some things have got to give. And for me, I gave up dancing. That was a big thing that I gave up. And going back to that made a big difference through the connection to dance, something that I'd done for many years growing up, but also just making those new friendships again with other women. Don't underestimate just having a few really good friends that you can rely on, because they can make the world of difference when you're having a bad day, a bad week, or when you get some really life-changing news. And going through this truly taught me how important these relationships are to our health. And it really was something that I hadn't considered before all of this happening, because I'm a very I like to believe, a very self-sufficient person. I don't like relying on other people. I like to be able to do things myself. And that's something that I have to work on, because I am that type of person that won't reach out for help, because I often believe that I do have to do everything myself. But having that support, having that energy around you, that energy that lifts you up rather than drains you, really impacts your health. And I also learnt as well at this time that I didn't have to hang out with people that were draining me just because I had been friends with them or known them for a long period of time. It didn't feel like an obligation that I had to continue to do. And so therefore, I started to change who I was hanging out with. And in some instances, I know we can't always do that, but we can limit sometimes maybe the amount of time we are hanging out with them. Sometimes, we don't have full control, but it's stuff we can work on. And I learnt that joy matters, relationship matters, travel. These are the things that light me up. Play, just as much as how much sleep I got, and was I hitting my protein intake, and have I done my workouts. All of these things together really make up your health. Health is so much more than just our workouts and our nutrition. It's all these things combined. So here are the 4 things I understand about health that I didn't understand back then. Number 1, rest is a part of health. It is essential. Your sleep, recovery, saying no to situations or people, and not constantly having to be productive. These are all different forms of rest and ones that I've had to lean into. And definitely, probably the hardest part for me for my health. Number 2, health changes with your season of life. Depending on your menstrual cycle, your age, your responsibilities, your energy, all of these things will influence your health. And it's okay for your version of health to look different at different stages of your life. As I said, in my 20s, I was all about hitting the gym, being super active, dialing in my nutrition, thinking about sleep a little bit, but not that much. That was probably about it. When I hit my 30s and I had kids and I was going through these changes of life, that version of health wasn't working anymore. And I finally realized, like many of us do, probably after too long, that I needed to think about those other areas: sleep, relationships, joy, rest. And my version of health changed and my priorities changed. And again, totally fine, because that was that season of life. And now that I've hit my 40s and it feels like some of that has settled, that stress, I'm able to focus again back into my workouts and my nutrition, which has been fantastic. But I've really had to incorporate more rest and recovery into this period of my life. And also that nervous system health has been a huge piece of the puzzle that I had started exploring in my 30s, but really committed to now in my 40s. Number 3, relationships are health. Good friendships, having boundaries, choosing people who support you and lift you up rather than drain you. Again, all of these things influence our state of health. And number 4, joy is health. For me, joy is dance, travel, being with my family, moving, hosting my women's retreats, Pilates, having experiences. For me, it's day trips, it's overnight trips, it's traveling, it's seeing new places and experiencing new things with my favorite people. These are the things that make me feel alive. And for you, it's finding what brings you joy. So 10 years ago, if you'd asked me what health was, I would have said a balance of diet and exercise and making sure you feel good. Today, as I've explained, my definition is so much bigger than that. It includes all those different facets of movement and nutrition, definitely, but the sleep, the stress, the relationships, the joy, the play, the rest, the connection, all of these things that make you feel happy, safe, and alive. And my health is not perfect. Like everybody else, I'm still working on it. I still sometimes say yes when I should say no. I still have times when I do too much work and I don't rest enough. I still have to remind myself to take a step back and not feel like I have to earn rest, that I can just have it. That's okay. But the difference is now that I notice these things. I notice them popping up and I can address them. And I think that's the biggest piece, is creating that awareness. And maybe you've done the same. Our health changes. Our version of health should change as we get older. And making it bigger and encompass more things is only going to be a benefit, because we're going to have a much more enriching life when we're thinking about our health in a broader aspect. Now, if you've been listening to this episode, I hope my little short cry, which I will edit out some of, just realize it probably went on longer than what you guys are hearing. If it resonated with you, but you're thinking you definitely don't need another diet or exercise plan or another piece of advice, maybe you just need to stop and look at what's actually supporting you right now, then I've created something for you. It's called the Busy Woman's Reset Guide. It's completely free and it's designed to help you simplify your health and create some small rituals around sleep and stress and connection and nourishment and movement to help you bring you back to yourself, so that you don't feel or don't get to the point necessarily where I was getting to. I hope nobody ever experiences that sort of feeling of complete burnout, because when you're in that point, you don't know what to do. You think you're doing all the things, and it's just not a great place to be in, and it takes a little while to come out of it. But if you're feeling like you want a little bit of support, as I said, maybe you feel a little bit not quite yourself at the minute, then this guide is for you, and you can grab it in the podcast show notes. And please don't download it and turn it into 27 things that you have to add into your life. Just pick one thing to focus on. Take it slowly, take it one step at a time. The rituals are simple and they're designed just to help support you in your everyday life, so that you realize looking after you isn't an option, it's a necessity. And when we look after ourselves, we can look after everybody else so much better. All right, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you again next week on the podcast.